Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Coffee Table Talks. Today we're going to be happy Friday. You guys, it was like beautiful here last week. It was like in the 80s and gorgeous, and everybody got outside and started to play in their yards, us included. And then this huge raft of storms came through, probably some tornadoes, and it's freezing. It's for us. For South.
Well, what's freezing for there? Is it like 70? Like, what's freezing? You know.
So it's like feet. We're cold. I'm cold.
Nice.
I'm in Tucson, so freezing is when you have to put a sweater on.
Yeah,
nice.
We're all gonna. Not as bad as that last like huge winter storm that came through, but it was not fun at all. So circle up and grab a cup. I got mine. It's big and steamy. It's look at that. I look at my. I had it for a couple of weeks now. But Josh and I are planning our first post-COVID excursion, and I'm so excited. We're gonna go to Orlando in May, and we're doing this. We're just awful parents, I think, because we're going to Disney without our kids for the first time. Like, Josh has never been to Disney, and the last time I went, it was like a high school thing.
Wow. So are you going to Epcot, like the tour of the world thing a lot, I guess? Drink wine?
No, we're not. We're only going for 2 days, and because we're hyper nerds, right? The two things we're going for is Star Wars and Harry Potter.
Respectable.
That's what we're doing. That's it. I am a giant 12-year-old. If nobody knew, now you know. Giant. Okay, I'm like 6 feet tall, so it really is. I'm giant 12-year-old. So for everyone who does not know Dennis, this is Dennis Underwood, one of my very first amazing friends in information security that is the CEO of a company called Cyber Crucible. So can you tell us real quick, Dennis, what the premise of Cyber Crucible is, kind of the mission, how you got started? There, we'll start there.
Yeah. I mean, it's a gray like hair didn't let you know already. I've been doing this for a while, and realized that it's a very manual process driven by art as much as skill, right? You need both, almost like a sculptor or whatever. Not that I know anything about that, right? So, but I realized that there has to be some way to decrease the art so that we can have more automation and increase the skill. And I said, well, the only way out of that is products. That has to be it. So that's kind of been the premise, is to make it affordable, so there's not 10,000 of me charging ungodly amounts per hour, through security companies, and make it affordable and available for a much larger population. I think the need's out there. Just has to be automation that fills it.
Yeah, definitely agree. And this is one of the reasons why you and I are friends, right? It's because you've got that passion and that drive and that mission and the belief that cybersecurity is not just for the rich. It should be something we can all enjoy. I guess if you enjoy that kind of thing, I enjoy that kind of thing. So that's my my super excited thing. So you were telling us before we went live a little bit of some Dennis Underwood origin story, and I'm hyper interested.
Oh man, that story. Yeah, it's a little bit off color, right? I mean, it's not necessarily linear. So when I was doing a bunch of threat hunting while in grad school, there was like a peer-to-peer botnet, and we're learning about cryptography and everything else. And I already had been in the industry, so it was like a version of Configure or something, I forget. Anyway, so I figured out how to have the bots all shut themselves down, like Independence Day movie, like style, where I could just say, hey, peer-to-peer folks, like hey friends, can you just go ahead and shut yourself off? I'm really the boss, and it was kind of cool, right? And I had this thing, and then one of the professors in the college were part of like this global botnet takedown community on this botnet variant, and they emailed out all of their friends, including the comrades, and said, hey, this guy found this thing, this hole, he can shut that everything. I didn't know he did that. That wasn't like I said, hey, you should go tell the hackers that, the criminals they have a vulnerability, Well, some folks floated in who wouldn't tell me their name overnight and wanted to buy it. The dean, I guess, was trying to get me to sell it to him so that he could sell it to these people. the whole time though, it was being patched by the bad guys. Their patch policy rivals like, Fortune 10 companies. It was just incredible to see how fast they were patching it. So I got to do this, like the dean and the other people who we can assume who they were, right? But we don't really know. Were trying to buy this. They didn't know that while we were talking, it was actively being, my capability was going away. So I actually, I did this whole like dramatic, like telenovela kind of soap opera thing where I was just like, I delete it now. And I deleted it, said nobody gets it, because I knew within about an hour, the whole thing would be gone, and so I was like, well, yeah. So, so a couple lessons: don't email public security forums that are global with your super duper malware vulnerability, because the bad guys go there too, right? That's lesson number one. Lesson number two: be like Dennis and have dramatic moments in your life where you're like, like Enrique, like on the telenova, and just do that once in a while, So,
but come on, you didn't finish. What was their reaction when you did that?
Oh yeah, we didn't talk about that. It was, it was biblical, gnashing of teeth, tearing of clothes, ashes on the head. I mean, yeah, it wasn't good for anyone involved, So, yeah. So I'm not sure I can go back there. I'm not sure I'm welcomed in the alumni org for that. So,
Noted.
Yeah.
You gotta let me know if you're ever invited to any alumni events, because I will laugh right along with you.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know if all the people are still there, but at the time, it was a very strong program down at UNC Charlotte. I haven't been there in 20 years, 10 years now, so I can't tell you. But at the time, it was great. It was all like cryptography. We talk about that, Will, right? Like the whole like fundamental. Okay, I don't know if cryptography is fundamentals, but like technology and algorithms and bits and bytes and how to do that versus some kind of like watered down vendor training really like set the stage for for a lot of future growth, even if you didn't come out knowing how to do Active Directory necessarily, but you really got exposed to how do we make Active Directory work? Who had the idea, where'd it come from? So it's that kind of stuff, and I'd really support anyone who really goes to town with the fundamentals.
Yeah, it's got to be get your hands on it, right? It's like, right. Okay, the biggest thing to learn in IT is how to bang your head against a problem and figure it out. Yeah. Break things, absolutely.
Yeah, always. We were talking about, before we went live, just for everyone else, about how much I don't necessarily appreciate vendor specific training. So before any of my vendors send me hate mail, okay. It's not that I don't think what you're doing is valuable. I do. I think it's valuable. I just don't think it's where everybody should start. And I feel like it's, fundamentals. Start there. Let's start with the fundamentals first, because once you grasp those concepts, going into those vendor training type sessions to become certified on whatever platform it is that your organization has drank all the Kool-Aid of, which is totally fine. Everybody has a preference. There's nothing wrong with that. It's going to make it a lot easier to wade through that training if you already grasp the concepts of the fundamentals. And then on top of that, whenever you leave, or if you leave, right? I'm not saying you should, but if you leave said organization that has drank all of one vendor Kool-Aid, or let's say said organization decides they'd like to try a different flavor of Kool-Aid, you're not lost. I get it from, a business type perspective. It's smart to, water the seeds that are going to pop up all your name brand, right? And also drink all of that Kool-Aid and have a preference towards your platforms, because now you've created future little customers forever. I get that.
And I like the model that I'm in no way affiliated with Rapid7 at all, but the Metasploit modules, are it's free, it's out there, and I noticed the best way to get a pen tester. There's gonna be. I know, Rachel, you have a bunch of senior people that are senior security nerds out there that will roll their eyes when I say this, but like make a pen tester go like a deer in headlights on you. Say, great, oh, the module's not broken, or the exploit's broken. Well, let's go ahead and fix the Metasploit module. We'll produce our own custom module, and like more often than not, they've never actually had to go in there and and see how the sausage is made and actually customize the exploit. But that's where the learning happens, right? I mean, figure it out. So big fan of that model, with the whole open source, and get their feet wet, and then maybe one day they'll go to Rapid7 to buy whatever commercial products they need.
Oh yeah, from the community college standpoint, right? The thing that we're saying over and over again is you've got to learn the concepts first, and then these vendors, man, why does everybody have to come up with their own name for the same concept? Right? you want to confuse kids like crazy, if you sit down and you think of the word domain, how many different definitions can you come up with for domain? Right.
Right.
20.
Yep.
And it's just, but everyone has to come up with their own sweet little quirky way of doing it, but the basic concept is the same. And the other big issue that you come across is that so much more of the books and elements like that are becoming recipe based. You want to do whatever you do, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. If you haven't learned the concept, if step 4 changes, you're sunk.
Which is a bit like my library was slowly transforming into O'Reilly cookbooks back when those were a thing, because I could get my little recipes. And little did I know I was causing the downfall of security civilization, by supporting that cause.
Yeah, well, now when it's in the textbooks, that's when it's a problem.
Yeah, definitely. So we designed this to kind of be a discussion a little bit about ransomware and healthcare. A little, right? It's the title of the thing today. Because I know you've been doing a lot of research lately, Dennis, into that industry, and weren't you guys working on a case study or something?
Yeah, we did have we did have some excitement come up, and we've had healthcare customers. It's a challenge for healthcare, right? Because it's ironic we took, I said how much I like Rapid7's model, but then at the same time I get upset whenever I see someone hand us a vulnerability scan report. The hospitals just can't go out there and patch that MRI server with the latest dodgy Microsoft patch. Like you just don't do those things. And so seeing some vendor come by, so I feel like that there's more vulnerabilities. There's also the business side, right? Where that doctor doesn't really, he has his new drug he wants to do. He doesn't care about that funding that you're saying HIPAA, and trying to save. But yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting world. XP machines right next to like Windows 10 latest and greatest, machine learning tool.
Yeah, definitely. We've got a few folks from different platforms here today. I just realized somebody from Twitch went by. I was like, hey.
Yeah, and Chip actually hit it right on the head. It's OT. It's a hybrid environment, no different than like an oil refinery, which, based on my limited knowledge of your area, Rachel, I'm just envisioning that like it's beaches and then oil refineries and then like oil derricks and platforms, since it's the Gulf.
There are very few beaches in Louisiana. It's more like the swamp suddenly let's go to saltwater kind of situation. So, but there is, if you want to come to Louisiana and enjoy a beach, go to Grand Isle. But also you have to keep in mind that, and this is nothing against my state. I love my state. I'm just saying the food's really good. Whenever they brought out the new qualifications to get your vaccine, I got mine yesterday because one of the qualifiers besides, asthma, COPD, or whatever other breathing ailments that you may have was the BMI. And my Kim, my COO, and I were laughing about that, going back and forth. We were like, hot damn, all of Louisiana just qualified to get their vaccination based on the BMI piece alone. Okay, because we like to eat. I'm just saying. really like it. We love our food. But yeah, if oh, that was loud. I'm so sorry. But it's yeah, if you want to come to one of the beaches here, I don't necessarily recommend it. I'm just saying we are at we're at the bottom of the Mississippi. Keep that in mind. So like all of the Midwest is draining into this.
Oh, awesome. So if I want my kids to grow and my garden to grow, I can have them swim in the river there. And, right.
I mean, the water is real murky this way. Okay, guys, there's a reason why, you know what though? I wasn't born and raised here. I relocated from Indiana, where creeks and sometimes ponds and lakes were actually a little bit clear. You come here and you can't see anything. And then you're also very keenly aware of all of the slippery, slidey things that are living in it, and alligators and snakes and stuff. And you'll see the locals, they will jump off of their little speedboats across lakes and just not a thought in the world. It's okay.
I thought you were going to say Russell a gator. I was like, oh man, this is intense, you know? So, okay.
I mean, they seem real prepared for that scenario to happen, and they're totally fine with it.
That's awesome.
I love my state. It's a crazy type of place to be. If anybody comes to visit, I will take you on one of the tours that the Cajuns do through the swamp, and we'll go feed some marshmallows to some alligators, because that's what they do. It's super fun. And definitely a deep dive into some local flair. But yeah, so anyway, sorry. Ransomware and Healthcare.
Yeah, no, we only have so much. Yeah.
Look at that. I chased a squirrel 17 minutes in. I'm doing good. At least we got there. Let's see. Security and healthcare is like Swiss cheese. You know?
That was saved like 3 times.
I feel like
Jelena is very passionate about the Swiss cheese, I think.
I feel like yes. But I mean, it's not just healthcare though. Like there's double dip in there. What did I do? Okay. It's not just healthcare, but it is. But right now it does seem that I'm hearing a lot of it. And I know you guys are too. And it's because now it's changed, right? The holes in your cybersecurity aren't just leaking out personally identifiable information, PII for everybody else that likes all their acronyms, or even, personal health information. It could kill somebody. Like we've taken it from here to like now we're talking about loss of life.
Isn't that kind of too what makes it a huge target for ransomware? Because they have to get things running, right? Because there is loss of life involved.
It's interesting whenever we'll talk to like a client, there's like 2 different camps, because one is the super hard, we can decrypt Ryuk, which is like the king of nerds kind of like side, right? Where like security people are like, you decrypted AES, oh my goodness, and then there's like the business side, which is like the nurse. If I talk to like the chief nurse side or the doctor side, it's I can't have downtime. Like that's great, you guys are geeking out, but like downtime is the biggest issue, and so so we end up, it depends on who we're speaking to, either have to wow the geeky side or wow like the like you said, Rachel, like they just can't go down. They can't have that nursing station or that pharmacy portal or whatever go down at the hospital, because there's people's lives on the line, and the ransomware people know that, right? Because they need to get you at the heartstrings and at the liabilities of that you're responsible for.
Now, my mom, one of the reasons I moved to Louisiana after living in Indiana was because my mom moved here after my parents split up when I was a teenager. And she was a nurse for a very, very long time at one of the bigger hospitals here in Baton Rouge, the Our Lady of the Lake. And I actually sat down and I asked her once, hey, Mom, I know that there's lots of, charting and everything else that the nurses rely on their systems for. What would happen if everything shut down? And she was like, oh, like a power outage? We have backup generators. And I was like, no, not like a power outage. Like you couldn't access any of it. Or, any of the any of the equipment in the patient's rooms, right? Because I can't just come to my mom and be like IoT, right? Any of the equipment in the patient's rooms that may be monitored by y'all in another office, like any of that. Like, what happens if all that just shuts down? And she was like, oh, well, that's not good, because there's some people that are machines. And I was like, okay, because she was a nurse, and they have 3 different kinds of ICU. If you're not familiar with healthcare environments, there's like a trauma ICU, and that was the one that my mom worked in for a very long time, which is super high anxiety stress environment. Okay, like if somebody gets into a car accident and is projectiled out of their vehicle and they landed on a pole over there and it's like through their side or whatever, once they get done in the emergency room, they go and hang out with my mom until she can make sure that they're going to make it. And there's lots of equipment that's involved in that may or may not be connected to a network situation. So they're dependent on this equipment to live. And then, let's just talk about the everyday random stuff. Like, I don't know, what are they? The pacemakers, right? That's important. You have,
wow. And also now they're getting into the whole concept of remote surgery. It's like, are you kidding?
Neat. Neat. And how many, and I mean, the one thing that everybody always laughs about whenever I'm in any kind of conversation about, the different systems at a healthcare organization is that the MRI machine runs on, Windows 95, right? Like, like it's right. So out of date. It's so out, but that's fine because, the network guys are like, that's cool. We just isolate it and it's, it's functioning, but not on the network kind of thing. Cause you can't even patch those vulnerabilities anymore. You need a techno necromancer to bring it back to life, right? It's not, not working unless you can wave a magical wand. And the machine costs millions of dollars. So you can't just replace the whole machine just because the OS is out of date. That's not happening. We're not doing that. So it's, off sectioned off, but there's so many things that aren't sectioned off. And sometimes there are healthcare organizations that don't realize that maybe they should segment that piece off from the rest of the network. They don't know what they don't know kind of stuff. And that is terrifying. I thought it was really nerve-wracking whenever I went in and when I first met or was introduced to Alyssa Knight. She does a lot of research into hacking APIs. When I first came across some of her research, it was all about these financial institutions and how the API connections of their apps were very vulnerable and keys were, hard coded in and all these things. And she discovered it and, shared it with everybody, of course, with redacted, so nobody was in trouble. And she was actually paid by some of these institutions to discover these things so that they could find them, because that's just responsible. Thank you for those institutions that do that kind of stuff. Pen testers are your friend. Should do that. And it was I don't know, it was so revealing to me about how these were huge financial institutions. Okay. This wasn't just like the bank that has 2 locations, mom and pop thing. Okay. This was like huge financial institutions. Right. And the vulnerability was just so daunting. It's like, wow, pull back the curtain and all of this stuff is held together with shoestrings and duct tape. And somebody that's MacGyver working on a shoestring budget trying to put some gum into a port just to
and we're never going to win. We're never going to win the price game, but I'm always frustrated whenever I see they'll give a researcher like her, we'll make up a number, right? You'll select some app like, oh, we gave them $10,000 in a shirt. And I'm like, yeah, well, someone on the dark web, would have bought that for a cool $1 million, knowing that they can, for ransomware, for instance, to make it easy and a direct cash flow, said, well, I can make that into a $30 million transaction for ransomware for just one victim, right? Imagine if, Rachel, just for everyone, I don't know the name of the bank that we're talking about, so I'm just going to name one. So let's say it's Bank of America. How much ransom would Bank of America take to have their bank go back up, you know, after being down for however many hours, minutes, days, whatever. Sure, I'd pay $1 million for that exploit if I was a bad guy. Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, it's that's very true. On top of everything else is the way that some of these organizations treat some of their researchers and some of their security team. And I mean, I'm sure you all have heard it so many times. I sat in a lunch a couple of weeks ago where one of the professionals there said, I tried to tell them that this was a problem. I tried to tell them that this was a problem. We can't do this. And it was, we were having a conversation about files leaving the network, right? So data loss prevention kind of situation. And they were like, I told my senior leadership that's not necessarily IT technically minded that mass amounts of data were going to a Dropbox. And they went, so? And then stopped listening. And I was like, okay, but did you explain to them why that might be super important to want to understand what's happening right there? Like, do they know? They don't know. They're relying on us to tell them because they don't. Other than that, it's falling on deaf ears. You're speaking a whole other language, right? You're speaking InfoSec speak.
Right.
Like, you can't speak InfoSec speak. You have to, like, I sat down and talked to my mom. I didn't say IoT. I said, what about the devices in the patient's rooms that keep them alive and are monitoring their health? Right? Okay, that takes a few more minutes to talk about, but you know, I don't know what she calls everything either, other than, yeah, that's an IV and that looks like a needle and I have no idea what gauge it is or why we need it or how to find a vein. Like,
it's very difficult because if you go back to your MRI machine, right? Great. Let's just segment the whole thing off. Okay. Then how do you get the images off?
Right.
You've got to connect somehow because all those images have to be able to feed to the physicians, you know, to the doctors that either as primary care physician or whomever. They've got to get those images somehow. How does that happen if it's completely segmented off?
I like what Chip just wrote about open file shares, which would also be like the MRI machines and stuff, right? Because they might block it off with some fancy network segmentation kind of stuff. My hands are too low, network segmentation kind of stuff, but the applications have to ride on top of that, right, to be able to communicate. We had to take a step back and implement like an auto scanning of file shares because we realized that, like, you know, number one, everybody has a handle on all their file shares, and also that nobody has a handle on all their file shares in reality, right? And then you have like, I don't like using I said earlier, I don't like using shadow IT as a word. Like, I know that really helps the discovery people who want to inventory, do inventory management, but like everybody has it, and the person that gets in the way of some big deal in the business, like the needs aren't aligned for the business, right? Either you sent that server and you talk to compliance later, but you just won that $5 million contract because you made the deadline, well, they're not going to fire that person, right? And the compliance guy loses every time, and so every single business we see is just file shares everywhere that no one knows exist. And it gets worse because, like, so let's say, like Will, maybe you have, okay, you don't have MRI machines at your college, I assume, right? But if you have a system like Rachel, let's say like it with your mom, like if a domain admin ever logged into that machine and their credentials are cached by that machine for Windows, like that means that domain admin also is still present, and someone can get on that machine and scan for any shares that the domain admin can see, in addition to what your mom can see, via her permissions. So it's actually like this, like it's almost like a mesh, where everyone is just like can actually see each other. It just depends on the right mix of users and where you're at.
Right. Because anything that you allow to happen, the criminals also know how to do that.
Yeah.
Trust me. If you're going to the internets to go find tools to secure your network, that's great. But the criminals also know that those are tools to secure your networks.
Right.
They're aware. They know what you're going to do. They know what your plan is already. So I'm going to guess that that healthcare. Wow, should have turned all of these fun notifications off. I'm just gonna guess that healthcare is just as susceptible to any sort of ransomware attack happening on their networks as the rest of the world, which is way to go, phishing, social engineering got in there some way like that. Am I completely wrong? Are there some other ways that that this is happening, or what do you feel is one of the, if you could knock it out today, what's like the big thing that the switch you would want to flip on healthcare to help them protect themselves?
Oh, geez.
You like my question? I just pulled that right out of the air.
I'm going to let Will handle that one. I'm going to go get a coffee. Actually, I have my big coffee mugs, but I didn't realize they're so big that like any drinks, and it's like having a mask because it like covers your whole face now, so no drinking. I gotta get mere mortal glasses, not these big Thor things.
I should have maybe started with that because we're a minute over time. For all those hanging out, thank you for hanging out, but we're gonna keep going because that's how we do things. Go ahead. Your turn, Dennis.
Oh man. Well, I mean, it has to be a defense in depth strategy. You're not going to stop them from getting in. You're not going to stop them from doing stuff. But it has to be an automated response. And it has to be remote because everyone is too spread out, and you don't want. I mean, God forbid during COVID, you have a bunch of dirty IT security people like me running through a clean section, right? Just tired and definitely not in scrubs. I mean, just imagine that. Like you're in surgery and this guy walks in who hasn't slept in 3 days, and like to try to save the MRI machine before it goes, or the robotic machine before, like what Will's saying, the robotic surgery, stop the robotic surgery machine from going haywire. I mean, that's frightening.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, we have a question. Where did it go? Where did it go? I just saw it. Question. Here we go. There we go. Do hospital network and guest network touch? Yeah, so no. If you're working in healthcare right now and you've got your guest network and your hospital network and it's all the same network, that's a bad idea.
What was interesting is they'll have like the guest Wi-Fi, and then the doctors, because everything's connected now. So we like to monitor the guest Wi-Fi because that is where all like the doctors, like, and the nurses, all their stuff connects to that, right? And so you'll have like the infection, like these hybrid devices that like have access to the material, but they're on the guest network, and so it's almost like you have your rule book and you have your Venn diagram, which doesn't quite touch, and then comes the iPhone, and it just like overlaps automatically, so yeah, it's a challenge.
Yeah, I think that's definitely an education piece too. Within the healthcare organizations, is I know doctors know everything, right? So they're hard to tell anything to, but you should do it. You should try. You try a little bit. Just be like, hey, it's just a question while you were standing here in the hallway for a second. The other aspect any device on your person like connected to the guest network, can we not do that?
Well, the other aspect of that, right, is that with realization starting to hit, because there's been quite a few health institutions that have been hit by the ransomware and stuff. So it's starting to dawn, but it's also like trying to change a tire at 60, right? Because they have the whole gambit of the Windows 95 systems on through to things that have to interact and get the imaging out, get the stuff out to the doctors in a very timely manner. Well, whenever you're going, in my mind, I may be wrong, but whenever you're going from one system to another, that's an opportunity, right? And that, as you stated before, in the application layer, that, great, we're going to encrypt everything. Okay, well, that also means that we encrypt it past our tools that do all that checking. So it gets very difficult.
I agree. I tried to explain to because someone was talking about PAM from like a ransomware perspective, like privilege access management and detecting if like the nurse is suddenly all the way over in accounting because the hacker took over their account, and she's looking at the cafeteria's like credit card transactions. It's a bad thing. But I noticed with ransomware is that it seems like it more often than not, it just kind of follows the natural flow of data in the business, because the machine's it on, just naturally it says, okay, well, who do I have access to connect to? And then it just kind of goes from there. So it's really interesting from like a tracking bad users, essentially, where fraud would definitely be like why is Rachel, so why is Rachel's mom the criminal mastermind nurse at the ICU who's poking around the pharmacy,
look, I'm just saying, my mom was a fantastic nurse. Okay. She was great. She was the nurse that was in charge of training new nurses. All right.
That's awesome.
She can't work the TV remote.
That's excellent. It's like Clark Kent. She took her glasses off and
yeah, no, past that, it was, that was like, that's what her whole everything was dedicated to, right? Like every last piece of brain cell was like medically trained and ready.
That is awesome.
But
that saved many people probably. I guess the point is like, if she's connecting to like the ICU database, that's her being an awesome nurse, right? And then so even after the fact, the logs kind of all blend in, where you're like, well, is that the bad person, or is that like just the person who's working really hard? And it's always hard to it takes like special sauce to separate the two, because we had to go through that, right?
Right. Well, it's like Rachel brings up, if your mom was that good of a nurse and training other nurses, if IT gets in the way, she's going to find another way around, right?
It's very true.
I asked her that. I was like, Mom, what was your opinion on your IT folks, your support? And she was like, I loved those people. They were amazing. They never made me feel dumb for 1 second, even though I knew I was really being dumb.
That's great.
I was like, oh, good. That's awesome.
And then how many IT people, for people like her, right, were like, you talk to them, and then like the CIO has this like very elaborate scheme set up for like access management, everything. And then someone like your mom is like, oh yeah, well, I had a hard time, so the IT guy set up like a share for me. I just like go to this like one IP address, and we're better than ever. And you're just like, wow, that $5 million on that big security plan really paid off, and was totally evaded by the nurses who were doing their job, So.
Yeah. Pretty much. If you want to know what workarounds are out there, go hang out in like whatever nurse's area, wherever they're standing to the side, if ever, because they don't really. Okay. I've never seen any of my mom's friends or her ever be like, oh man, had time for lunch today. No, they did not.
This is why, okay, PIMA plug, but momentarily, that we have this fusion center area, because we have nursing, we have elements with accounting, we have law enforcement, to where cybersecurity and cybersecurity understanding can't be just in IT anymore, right? Because all these getting workarounds, people need to understand what those workarounds actually mean and do. And so you've got to make a fusion of some of the understanding areas so that the whole company can be part of the IT security, right? Because otherwise people will find a way.
Yeah, definitely. There was a question that went back that I don't know how to segue into it. So here we go. Awkward segue. Jelena asked, look at that, it's a squirrel.
That's right, squirrel.
Jelena asked, how do we get our original information back after ransomware? So maybe we could talk a little bit for those who maybe aren't as savvy about ransomware, that may be hanging out or watching this later, what ransomware does to your information, and what people like Dennis, after they come in and fix it, or can they fix it, or how is it fixed? Maybe we could do a little bit of that. What do you think? Everybody cool with that? We can do that. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I've been talking some. Did you want to answer, or do you want me to go to town? Okay, here we go. With your treasonous Catholic mask in the background, like the Guy Fawkes. So So ransomware, what it does is it goes ahead, they get in your system. Think of like a World War II, like you have this like old videos of like the bridge getting blown up, by the good guys, the bad guys, and there's like all these like detonations along the way, right? So what happens nowadays is the ransomware gets in, the bad guys kind of maneuver around, they do a bunch of stuff to prepare. I call it prepare the battlefield. I'm an old army guy, so and then what they do is then all at once they'll just detonate, and they will encrypt your files. It's the same kind of like encryption used by like PNC or Bank of America or whatever, right? What they do is they encrypt all the servers first, and then at the very end, then they go ahead and they will change the desktop and say, hey, you've been encrypted. So by the time you see that, they've already kind of encrypted everything. It's normally a different, super, super hard to crack key per file or per directory. So it's not like there's like one master key to unite them all. It is like, 10,000, 100,000 keys. They'll encrypt at around 300 files a second per infection. So if you have 10 machines, then 300 times 10 carry the 4, you end up with a couple thousand encrypted per second, right? So and that's just for 10.
Yeah.
So that's what ransomware does, and that's kind of like the 101.
Right. So for those who have who regularly back things up, right? I don't mean that you just have a backup policy, because policy means nothing if you don't carry it out in your procedures. Just saying. You can talk about it all day, but you got to actually do it. So restoring from backups, how long would that usually take for, say, I don't know, what we would consider a medium level enterprise or a medium sized healthcare organization?
Well, I mean, Will, have you ever gone back from backup, or have you ever had to? Or, no? Yes?
Well, there's also the question of so backup all comes into data and how much data is lost in between and all that kind of stuff. That's purely on the data side. But then also, how long has that ransomware been there? Just because when it detonated doesn't mean it hasn't been there long enough to cycle through your backup strategy.
Right. We saw that, and then we actually had an instance where Ryuk had, if you look in the news and LinkedIn feed, it said Ryuk lost its mutex, and even like the geeky of the post were like, oh, okay, like that's confusing, but like for normal people that was like meaningless. So what happens was that sometimes the backups would be encrypted or other things, and Ryuk stopped caring if you already were hit once. So like we were watching where files were like triple encrypted, like an onion, like Shrek, like it was like layers of encryption.
Yeah, I never thought about that the encryption was encrypted and then encrypted.
Yeah, so there's different backup, like recovery can be really hard, because if you have those 10 workstations, right, and then even if it only encrypted once, you have 10 different machines all generating keys that they have to track, like which machine they came from. It's like a huge like inventory management nightmare. It's like Amazon warehouse. Like keeping track of toothbrushes. Of like that one backup might have like 20 different individual infections with 1,000 keys each. So recovering, even if you pay for the ransom and everything else, really difficult. Even without talking about Rachel, your mom is machines came back up. She's like, oh, I got to get caught up, doing good in the world. Oh, here's that file. Oh, it turns out that medical record was what was infected. And you're back on the carousel and everything starts all over again, and then you're like, don't blame the user, but, and that's why, like, we normally will even, install our prevention tool, like, while recovering, because we're like, we see the backups are infected either with the malware, if they're not encrypted, just because we're backing up malware too, right? Or or the hackers never left and they're kind of hanging out and laying low, and then we'll watch they'll come back as soon as you're back in business, so.
Right. Ron asked the question for Dennis, if we assume the malware is getting in some way and evades the standard tools the attackers know about, how do we catch it before it's too late?
This is like a sales pitch question, but yeah, I mean, it has to be automation. It has to be, right? There's no way. We actually, for the exchange, to be, go anecdotal for a second, for the exchange stuff, there was the exploit actually gave the attackers direct access to Active Directory, and we're going to talk more about this next week. But like, they could have just like pushed out the software using Active Directory, and any manager who is like, oh, I'll just go to the office and start shutting down machines. I'm like, yeah, you're not going to beat automation, and it has to be machine versus machine at this point. It can't be people trying to shut off, like your mom taking a break from surgery or whatever to like shut down the MRI machine. Like, oh, hold on, let me go to start menu. While the thing's just going nuts. So it has to be automation, and it has to be, unfortunately, it has to be behavioral based, because they're redeploying the new stuff. Like, but by the time it's the bane of every security vendor and every person in like Will's shoes, where it's like the attacker had version, 19 March version, of their malware, right? And then it flies right through, and then all the security vendors work really hard, and they get stuff up to catch it in 2 days, and then Will, you call in the vendor and you're like, expletive, and then the vendor is like, look at my demo, it catches it perfectly. And you're like, what's going on? I'm in the Twilight Zone. Yeah. And it happens over and over and over. So there has to be like the ability to kind of check by the behaviors, whether it's, I know there's different companies who do a great job on behavior for like anti-malware, that seem to do a pretty good job. That's why I think attackers go after them and shut them off, because they're like, if you can put the SWAT team to sleep, then you don't have to like be all ninja,
Exactly.
And then we had to focus on cryptography, because that's where the ransomware is. It has to be cryptography behavior. So anyway, there's my like little soapbox. Yeah, but I'm done.
So basically, I mean, just to sum that piece up, the attackers are attacking in a very coordinated type fashion. So I think the defense also has to be just as coordinated and beautifully orchestrated as the attack. And it goes between, awareness training, right? One, don't click that. Don't do it. And then being able, with the behavioral analytics piece, identify whenever something seems like, what's happening? Why is that doing that? That doesn't normally do that, right? And having employees in monitoring those behaviors that are trained to understand whenever there's an anomaly that shows up, and then policies in place to make sure that if poo hits the fan, we don't all stink, and then and then come back with awesome people like Dennis.
You just described a great lab environment. But in the real world, right, you're stuck with just simple problems like, if you have anything that has any sort of PII of any sort, it has to be encrypted, not just in transit, but at rest, right? And so if you have that encrypted on your storage, fortunately, hopefully it's block type storage, so it's off. But if they're all the same type of systems, then before you even think about ransomware, if something ransomware hits your keys or your key store of where your backups, if you were to go for your backups, do you have the keys to unlock your own storage, right? And if that got hit by ransomware, well, now you're really stuck, right? So this all comes into play, and it takes a great deal of expertise to understand, as we were talking about, the concepts. Because if people are just thrown in boxes without paying attention to the concepts, there's all sorts of chokeholds, right?
You mentioned the email training, Rachel. So there was a company I had that was a client, and their people were really, really good about not clicking on things, and they had like every possible security tool. It was really cool, and they approached us. We're normally like second or third in line when they need help on the pen test side. So they were like, we can't get them to click on this malware, and we need to show that, we need to get in, So I actually, and they were setting up, of course, the normal junk phishing and everything, and the employees were doing beautifully. They were trying to get into like the payroll department or like the, I guess, accounts receivable. So I downloaded their one of their publicly available in the accounts receivable department for this big company. They had like their like vendor form for like submitting a PO, and I needed a Adobe PDF that I could put an exploit into. So their training, they did perfectly, but I injected my payload into a form of which 30 people were required to open it up in a timely fashion and respond to. And I filled it out as whatever, like a vendor, and sent it to them. And sure enough, pop. They did perfectly. I mean, I had system on their boxes. And at that point, of course, I could run ransomware or whatever I wanted to do. That's, as a pen tester, that would have probably been a bad career move and a great way to get my company sued. But the point is, it better be enough money to go hide in a cave in Pakistan for, until I die. But that's a joke. I wouldn't do that. So for all the lawyers listening, who are salivating now, but yeah. So the point is with the perfect training, I was able to get right through, and all of a sudden the whole office was taken to task by me because they were really good at their job. They were on it. So
right. I mean, they're people too. Like, we're not infallible. We're squishy. We bleed when you poke us. You can't harden the person. You can prepare them and coach them and train them and add a girl, add a boys for whenever they do a good job. But I hate to say beautifully done, but a beautifully done attack is gonna win.
Yeah.
Because we are still humans, and just like that one was designed to play on something that they were very in the familiarity space, right? They automatically trusted it. They'd always trusted it, right? That's not hard. I mean, it's not hard to see why they all were like, let's click stuff, right? So that goes back to it all having to be so beautifully orchestrated. And I'm sorry if I'm describing a perfect lab environment, okay? This is the way I see my utopian security world. I just need everyone else to see it. All right.
And pay
that's
for it.
Well, I think that's why we even though we love, like, I'm a threat hunter, right? So I always am trying to figure out a way to keep them out. But it just came to the point where I was just like, yeah, that battle. Unfortunately, we're not going to keep them all out at the like the Maginot Line or whatever. Now we have to expect there's going to be problems on the inside too, and just have I always call it speed bump security, which I'm careful who I say that to, and so hopefully no one comes back and flames you, Rachel, but it's kind of like, slow them down. Is it a big enough speed bump to I was thinking back when I was in college and in late 90s, so and everyone was like taking their Honda Civics, which they could have bought a better car, but instead they spent a lot of money like making it really low. And my wife was at an all-girls college called Chatham, now Chatham University, and they had speed bumps to keep people going slow, right? And it was funny because the speed bumps had different heights, and you could almost guaranteed on a Friday night find some kid in an old Honda Civic had to drop down the suspension, and it was always how many speed bumps did they go over before they got stuck, Right. And I mean, I was like a poor kid down the street at Pitt, so I didn't even have I walked, but full disclosure, But I don't, it's always funny for me, because I'm like, oh, look, they made it 3 and then they got stuck. And I always feel like security's kind of like that, right? Where you have ones that kind of sail right through and go visit their girlfriend, all girls school, right? So, it's and then at the time, but other ones would get stuck on the way, right? I don't know how that date went, because I mean, what do you do at that point, but
rocket back and forth.
Yeah, I mean, you see him there with like Jack trying to get. I'm like, well, the next one's higher, so what are you gonna do? But I feel like security's like that, right? Like, like there's certain levels of quality of your Honda Civic pimping, and you just gotta like, figure out where you can get through all the barriers, and then of course,
I think that's a beautiful place to end it. I think that's perfect. Right.
Wonderful,
there.
Great. Now my HR director's gonna be calling me, being like, "I heard what you said, and let's have a talk." Like, I can't.
Now we can confuse people. Let's have 4x4 security.
Yes.
Perfect.
Honda Civic security. Honda will come after me now, and my HR director, and Chatham College. I mean, it's I made everyone angry in one analogy.
One, I'm flattered that you think that I am that popular and writing this down. Okay.
This is
first of all.
Yeah.
To all two of the people that love me so much. I don't think either one of them is a lawyer.
Maybe they'll give me the option: get sued or go jump in the river you were talking about. Like the bayou, whatever. That's my punishment.
Back when I worked on the systems for the college, right? When people would ask me, "What do you do?" I'd say, "I work on the systems that make the largest people angry in the shortest period of time."
Fair.
Nice.
That's super fair. My kids are convinced that Josh saves the world from his office, and I'm like, I'm gonna let that happen.
Right.
I'm gonna totally just let that happen because I feel like that too.
That's awesome. With this big battle axe, and is that the Thor axe in the background?
It is.
It is very good.
I would like for everyone to take a moment to appreciate the 3D printing prowess that is Joshua Arnold. And we don't have a big one. Like we're not that cool, right? Like my living room is the biggest room in our house. Okay, guys. It's not like it starts here and gets better. This is it. This is the top. So it's just a regular, like little, I don't even know bed size numbers. I'm not a 3D printing expert. All I know is there's like, you got to go get a file and then like whatever. And it takes days. So this, I think he started it 2 weeks ago, maybe. And it's been the only thing he's been printing and working on since then.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
He's quite sophisticated. I'm trying to convince him, by the way, to build something very cool and fun and nerdy like that. And then, so for those who don't know, I volunteer for the Innocent Lives Foundation, which is a group of hackers that dedicate their time and or not just hackers, right? But like industry professionals, I guess is the proper way. Industry professionals that volunteer their time and efforts in correlation with law enforcement at all levels to unmask child predators online. And they started this thing last year that was a virtual, what they called ILF Fest. And it was really cool and very awesome. Anyway, you should go back and go look up ILF Fest for last year. Okay. It was fun. And they're doing it again this year. And I'm hoping that maybe we can convince Josh to build something really hype cool like this and like auction it off for donations. I think
that'd be great.
I'm thinking we're going to have to butter him up. So everybody go find Joshua Arnold and go tell him how amazing this is. And that he should make one for the
Looks really cool. And it's funny because like you hear because there's the whole like Chris Roberts like hacker versus criminal thing. And it's really interesting to me because like I always see those sessions with the people who do 3D printing, and it always reminds me that when they like they're doing like hacking, and I'm like, well, it's actually pretty good because that's a good analogy, because like I see so many times where like they'll build like 10% of the, I guess, hammer thing, and then like they'll do it wrong, and then they'll hit a failure, and then they have to come back again and to get the right mix, and I would cry.
It can be that the bed that is being printed on is out of alignment by like a hair.
Right.
Like he spends so much. There is more, you wouldn't imagine how much time is spent making sure that bed is level.
And I would, I mean, I almost feel like if we can show like a sped up like YouTube video and be like, this is what the attackers are doing, because it really is like hacking, where they're like, I mean, sometimes they'll sail in with their 4x4, But the rest of the time, they're like, they're getting stuck on that speed bump, and they got to rebuild the hammer. Like they got 30% of the way there, and they got to go back and figure it out and do it again. And they're not going to stop. So I think that's really cool. Like, so have them make a video of I forget what they call Stormbreaker. Is that what they called that thing? I can't remember. Yeah. Like, okay, I got it right. Cool. Then like a video, like a time-lapse video to be like, look how many times I don't know if you failed or not, but like, look how many times you failed along the way, but eventually it was done and it was really awesome. Only for bad guys, I guess you got to switch like morbidly awesome. I don't know what the negative way of saying awesome is, but like, like they accomplished their feat,
right.
And their feat was your downfall, but regardless, they accomplished it. Good job, so.
Exactly. Well, guys, I've got 30 minutes until we got to start prepping up for the all ladies table that's this afternoon. So come back and hang out more. Not that you haven't had enough. But we're doing that this afternoon with Miss Tabitha from the Diana Initiative. I'm so excited. If you don't know what the Diana Initiative is, come back and see us in about an hour. We'll be setting up 30 minutes before and making sure that you can hear us. That kind of stuff. But thank you very much, Dennis, for coming and hanging out and sharing some insights and stories. I love storytelling. And thank you for everybody that in the chat, especially, Chip, way to go, man. You gold star. Perfect. I love it. I will have to figure out where to send you. I need stickers. I need somebody to make me stickers. I need little coffee cup stickers that are like,
nice.
Aggressively optimistic.
Will and I are influencers, so we're happy to train you up on how to make better YouTube videos and have commenting sections. So.
Oh, good. I do. I need it. So anyway,
that pretty confidently.
And look, if anybody's interested in seeing a bit more from Cyber Crucible, or just you want to really hang out with Dennis, give me a ping. I'll set that up for you. Dennis is one of our partners here at SecureNation, and we really like them. So
thanks a lot, Rachel. Yeah, you guys are awesome. Will, I'll be in touch about the honeypot you have going on. The awesome. Hacking thing. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much, guys, for circling up and grabbing a cup. Don't forget to come back and see us next week for another fabulous session of way too much coffee and probably going over on time. Love you guys so much. Have